Last week, Anthropic held their developer conference and released a stack of announcements. AI that grades its own work. Claude can now dream. And Claude Code has goals? Let's walk through what they announced and what that tells us about where Anthropic is heading next. Ahead of their Code with Claude developer conference, Anthropic announced that they had reached a deal with SpaceX, of all companies, for more compute. And that means higher usage limits for Claude, kind of. So with that extra compute, they are now doubling Claude Code's 5-hour rate limit for Pro, Max, Team, and seat-based enterprise plans. They're also removing the peak hours limit reduction on Claude Code for Pro and Max accounts, and they're raising their API rate limits considerably, they say, for Claude Opus models, as shown here. So it is important to note, while they're doubling the rate limits for those 5-hour chunks of time, they're not actually doubling overall usage. You still have a finite amount of tokens you can use in a week. But if you're constantly running out of that 5-hour block of time, this might be really welcome news for you. While we're on the subject of paid plan usage, I actually got this email while I was preparing notes for this video. It has to do with the way that they're going to change the billing for Claude Agent SDK and Claude-P usage. This is pretty specific. So this change is for all paid plans. Starting on June 15th, you will start to get a monthly credit roughly equal to the amount that you're paying per month for your plan. So Pro users get a $20 credit, Max users get a $100 credit, and so on. This is specifically for the Claude Agent SDK and Claude-P usage. So a lot of people do not use Claude with the Agent SDK kit. They're probably coding in Claude Code or in Cursor or something like that. This will not affect you. But if you use the Claude Agent SDK or you send in a lot of prompts to Claude just using the -P on the command line, pay attention, because you can't use your subscription coverage for those things anymore. Those will now be billed separately, and that's why they're giving us that extra monthly credit. They do have a few caveats about what the credit covers and what it doesn't apply to and how it works. If you think this might affect you, I suggest checking your email. You should have something in there, or going to this website. I'll link it in the description below. Most people, if you're just using Claude Code for your coding, you won't notice this. It won't affect you. Next up is Agent View in Claude Code. This is similar to seeing all of your sessions together like in the Claude desktop app, but in your terminal. The way it works is you can either inside of a session just hit the left arrow or start up Claude by typing Claude Agents and bring it up in this agent view. Once you're there, you'll see a list of running agents, and they have various hotkeys and commands to reply to a session, peek at a session, see what it's doing. If you're inside of another session and you want to add it to that agent view list, you can just type /BG for background. You put that agent in the background and it will pop up on your agent view list. So I did try to set up a demo of this for this video. You can hit enter to enter inside of the running task and tell it to proceed. Then you can hit the left arrow and go back out and watch the agent working. If I kick off another task in another window and put it in the background, it should show up in our agent view. This is pretty good, but honestly, it feels like an exercise in just remembering hotkeys. It's a little bit confusing to manage because there's so many different very specific keys. But if you prefer working in the terminal, you might be interested in this because it does allow you to collapse all of your work together in one view. I've also seen a lot of people online saying that they love using this in tandem with remote control. They can just see everything all in one spot and just continue to tell their agents what to do. I will say it is pretty important that when you start your tasks, try to remember to give them as much permission as you feel comfortable with. I constantly forget to start my agents in either YOLO mode or auto mode, and I just noticed that a lot of my agents were kind of stopped waiting on permission from me, and it wasn't necessarily obvious. All right, so this guy is waiting on my approval. Let's see if I can get in there. Tell it yes. hit the left arrow, and we're back out into agent view. It's a little hard to tell. So I would say this isn't 100% there yet, but I do love the direction it's going because it is really nice to be able to see everything all in one place. The other thing that is worth calling out, if you exit out of there and you want to get back in, it doesn't kill your agents. You can just type Claude Agents, get back in there, and your agents are all still running. They're not tied to this particular session. The next item up in Anthropic's self-management suite is /goal. So this is where you can set a completion condition and Claude will just keep working until that condition is met. Once it thinks it's done, it spins up a brand new agent, and currently it'll use the Haiku model. So it'll use a much cheaper model that has no context to where the task was running. That Haiku model will come in and look at the success condition and look at the project and decide whether that condition has been met. It'll grade it, yes or no. If the answer is no, it'll tell Claude to keep coding, keep working toward the goal. So this might be helpful if you've ever had those times where you tell Claude something like run all the tests, or maybe make sure there's no linting errors. And it, especially if it's a big project, it gets a little bit of context window drift, and it just sort of forgets what it was working on and says it was done. You have to go back in and just say, continue, keep working on your tasks. So this is really nice because Haiku can come in with that fresh set of eyes and say, you know, you haven't quite finished yet. This is effectively just giving Claude its own self-continue mechanism. So if you follow Codex news, you might remember that Codex released exactly the same thing a few weeks ago. At the end of April, they also gave us this /goal. Give Codex a task to keep working on until there's a verifiable stopping condition. So I would say this is a pretty good indication this is where the AI industry in general is headed. Anytime you've got two companies that release the exact same thing within a few weeks of each other, you know you're onto something. It's sort of another way they're trying to get the work done correctly without you needing to step in and intervene. It gets the human out of the loop. Okay, the next few features I'm going to talk about are part of Claude's Managed Agents feature. Claude Managed Agents is a suite of APIs for building and deploying cloud-hosted agents at scale. This is for people who are building their own agents for deployment. Not something I usually look at or even talk about, but because they had their developer conference last week, they've added some features, and very often those features that start out at that bigger sort of enterprise level will eventually trickle down to Claude Code users. So I think these are interesting to look at to see the direction they're headed. So the first one is dreaming. You may have heard about this one. It kind of made news because it's got just a lovely, fanciful name. So we already know that Claude's been adding and enhancing memories lately. They've added memories at the project level so that Claude can keep track of things that you tend to do over and over, but dreaming takes that a step further. It allows Claude to look at those memories across multiple projects and look for patterns at a broader level than a single agent would be able to find. It's a scheduled process that allows Claude to look across multiple projects looking for patterns. This could be things that you do consistently, maybe a certain way that you like to build your projects, or it could even be mistakes. So this could be mistakes that you make over and over, or it could even be mistakes that Claude repeatedly makes. Either way, it just allows Claude to have a bigger picture across your entire set of projects and sort of sift together through all of those memories and see if anything emerges. Bigger picture. Now, they do say that you can control the updates. You can either let Claude run this dreaming session and just update automatically, or you can make it ask you to review the changes to make sure it's something that you want changed. So right now, dreaming is in research preview only. It is only for managed agents. And if you want to use it, you have to request access to try it. But I am hoping that this might trickle down to the rest of us Claude Code users at some point in the future. The next thing they announced with these managed agents is something called outcomes. So at first glance, this looks a lot like /goal to me. You get to define an outcome and you tell the agent what the outcome should look like in order to define success. But this lets you actually create a rubric as an outcome. So look at this example rubric that they've given us. This is an entire markdown file with a definition of what they want their document to end up looking like, what kind of information it needs to have, and what order. So this is a lot more expansive than just make sure you run all the tests or make sure there's no linting errors. So with this, they even allow you to upload a rubric as a file, so you can give it quite a bit of definition. In their own internal benchmarks, they showed that using this outcomes feature improved both PowerPoint and Word documents by 10% and just a little bit over 8% respectively. So that's pretty good. That's impressive. And I think it also allows you to give a little bit more of almost like a template to Claude to tell it what the output should look like and how it should be structured. And in just the same way as the /goals works, the Claude will work to get toward the desired outcome. Once it thinks it's done, the output gets handed to a separate grading agent. The grading agent reads the output, reads the rubric, and gives it a score. If it thinks it's passed, you get success back. If it hasn't, it'll tell Claude to keep working toward the goal. So I think this is like goals, but with a lot more nuance and a lot more information that you can give it about what success looks like. This one I'm definitely hoping works its way down to Claude Code as well. Their biggest announcement with this is I believe it is now in public beta. I think this was available in research preview before, but it's now available in public beta. But again, only for managed agents. And the last one that I'm just going to quickly mention is advanced orchestration with managed agents. So this is multi-agent orchestration, where it lets one agent coordinate with others to act in parallel in their own isolated context. It just went into public beta as well, so I figured I would just round out the announcements and mention that. If you're interested, I will, of course, include a link to the documentation. So that's a few of the bigger announcements from the Code with Claude Developer Conference this year. The bigger takeaway for me is the overall picture. All of these things are pointing at a more autonomous, hands-off, agent-driven workflow. And for all of these, the clearer you are in your own definition of success, the better outcome you're going to get. I do think it's worth experimenting a little bit to see if I can build a rubric for myself and just see if I can put together a poor man's version of this goals with a rubric kind of outcome. I think it'd be interesting to hand that to Claude and see what happens. I will also say this is definitely a case of the more things change, the more they stay the same. If you define what success looks like, you're going to get a better product. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.